I've been trying to drink more water, but like 3 bathroom breaks per hour, very disruptive.
True that. Wearing turtlenecks for warmth and not to cover up hickeys, who knew?
I remember hickeys. I was really good at covering them up. Did it for friends all the time.
You know what, Sarah? I am saying goodbye to normal, and gosh darn it, I am okay with it.
Have such a good day. Hello and welcome, everyone, to another fun-filled edition of Have Such a Good Day, the show that wants you to do just that.
Hey, buddies. Hey, pals. Please try to save us from ourselves today.
Wow, starting off on the right foot, huh, Heather? It's been a week.
It has been a week, but you know what? It ended last night in a way because today's Friday, but I did have a couple cocktails for the first time in a very long time, so it ended on a high note, I would say.
Well, that's good to hear. You probably aren't listening to this until sometime in March, but it does happen to be a Friday when we are recording, so not live after all, everyone.
TGIF.
Yeah, that's the beauty of podcasts, right? I mean, we hope you're kind of up to date, but if you're not, I mean, you can listen to an episode from 6 months ago if you feel like it, all good.
It's actually fun to do that. And it doesn't even matter a lot of times because the subjects that we talk about aren't usually super topical. And, so they don't age like we do.
Except that we do a weekly roundup at the beginning of the show of how our weeks have been, which is pretty topical. But
that is.
Yeah, it's a little of everything. You never know what you're going to get. Where are we in the world? What is time? Is it a flat circle? No one knows.
The ladies that I met last night for these cocktails that I speak of, they're my new kind of Humboldt friends. And this is like the first time I've actually gone out with some girls, like seriously, in the last year that weren't my like previous friends.
Sure.
And they have very interesting names. They sound very exotic. Their names are Anda, Alexandra, and Sasha. So those are like my new lady friends. And I had a great time with them last night. It was really fun. And it was so refreshing to just hang out with people and, hear about these girls' lives that new friends, new people I don't know much about. It was very cool.
Very cool. Yeah. Humboldt, California, for anyone who's like, where's Heather? It's a
county.
It's a county, Northern California, big state. It's up near the top. Cool spot. I've actually never been there, so I think it's cool. I don't really have any firsthand experience, but I'm going to go ahead and guess it's cool. But yes, known for weed and trees and
farms
and all the good things.
And really good farmed food, local farms, actually wine and beer and cider. There's actually like a lot of beer and cider stuff up here, which I find interesting. There's a lot of new things that I'm learning. It's not just a creepy van county, Sarah.
Listen, I'm a creepy van fan myself. In fact, on my walk with Otis last night, we've been doing these evening walks because the sun is staying out just slightly longer than it was a couple months ago.
It's great.
Yeah, so I'm like, at 5 p.m., I got an hour still before it's getting dark. And I like it because then I don't have to get everything done like really early in the morning. So anyway, long story, but I have this thing that I really enjoy, which is vanity license plates. And sometimes they make sense to me and sometimes they don't. And I've walked past this one house a million times, and there's this really cool old VW bus that's always parked in the driveway, and it's kind of beat up, but it's so old that you're like, I love it, and it's bright orange. I mean, it's just,
I love those.
Yeah, I just want one. And I just never noticed the vanity plate until yesterday, and it's Larry.
Oh my God, I love
with
that.
Lots of A's and lots of R's.
That. That's great.
I was like, one day someone's going to be like, maybe getting in the bus and I'm going to be like, Larry.
Like, hey, Larry.
Yeah,
Yo, Larry.
And he'll be like, or she, who knows, how do you know me? I'll be like, because of your vanity plate, man.
I love it. My first boyfriend I think I mentioned this on the show before, he had a bright orange VW bus with like a Porsche engine. They like modded it. His dad modded it. And that van was incredible. I remember getting in a car accident in it, and they're very unsafe because, I remember I was eating an ice cream cone and he rear-ended somebody, and the ice cream flew off the cone, and we jolted forward, And the problem with those vans is that they have it's just a piece of metal in the front and there's
yeah.
nothing else, and they get completely dented in. They're very dangerous, actually. But there is a new VW electric van coming out. Have you seen those, Sarah?
I'm not sure. There's
Those
so
are pretty
many
dope.
EV cars these days. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree. So how's your week been, Sarah?
Well, thank you for asking. It's been fine. I've had a really uneventful week. You mentioned going out for cocktails, and through I was going to say fault of my own, I haven't had a cocktail. Well, I haven't had a cocktail in I don't even know. Maybe it was last year on my birthday or something, because I'm not much of a cocktail person.
Yeah.
But I haven't had any alcohol in I don't know, 2 months.
No wine or anything?
No, nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, because I haven't been going
impressed.
anywhere, and I'm in kind of save money mode. Tax season's coming up, and I gotta count my change where I can, and not that I'm buying crazy expensive bottles of wine when I do want a nice vino with dinner, but I was like, what I'll do is try to, when I go to the grocery store, because I love grocery stores, and I often end up buying $45 vitamins because I stood
You
there
gotta
long
love a
enough
good
and I
grocery
convinced
store.
myself that I needed to buy them. And, I'm just one person. I'm not feeding anybody else. And I'm, walking out of the grocery store with plenty of food, but still it's that's a chunk of change. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to just pay more attention to the bottom line here when I'm going in, and be just a little bit more purposeful with what I'm getting. And things like wine don't actually need that to survive. And when you
Sure.
cut it out, boy, do you save money. So yeah, it's been a while. And
Do you even crave it?
no, because I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm
Yeah.
working, or I'm staying home, or I'm, quickly doing some errands, and there's just no real celebration to be had, and I'm okay with it because
Yeah.
I'm sleeping well. So there you go.
You're okay with the new normal. It's funny. I'm not a cocktail person anymore either, and I used to be, and it was weird actually having a cocktail last night. It's just it has that celebratory vibe for sure. But I definitely drink wine. For me, it's more of the ritual. One glass of wine most nights, red wine, and it's just it's that marker of the end of a day, and I can
Totally.
just chill out, put my feet up, and enjoy something. And it's more symbolic. It's not about me getting drunk or buzzed. I don't care about that. It's more just to take it down a notch,
Hey, I'm with you. I may have mentioned on a previous episode, red wine does not agree with me anymore, and it's a real bummer because, well, I like all wine. I've always liked wine. That is, if I never have a beer or any sort of liquor again, sure, maybe I'd miss it every once in a while, but it doesn't really matter. But wine, I do love. But I've finally come to terms. Well, I came to terms a while ago, but I just kept hoping it would go away, that even a glass of red wine, just one, when I'm well hydrated, I've had food, the whole thing, I'm thick in the morning, I overheat overnight, and the whole next day, I'm just kind of not firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
And I can't make that go away. And so red wine is kind of out.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
And of course, over the winter, because we're, it's still, it's pretty cold where I live at night. And so, yeah, that kind of okay, I'm hunkered in for the night, glass of wine with dinner, maybe watch a show. That all sounds great in theory, but I'm well, I can't drink red wine. And I'm probably not going to make myself a hot toddy. And white wine sounds cold. And I'm yeah, I'm not doing it. So that's just the end of that.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it was a week or so ago. We went to there's a little winery with an outdoor patio that's their own wine, and they had a Chardonnay hot toddy, and I thought I'm not the biggest Chardonnay fan, but it was so good. It was Chardonnay and lemon. And
And it was
I
hot.
don't remember what else. It was hot, and it had a cinnamon stick in it. It really did taste like a penicillin or a hot toddy kind of thing. It was really
Penicillin?
good. Yeah, there's a drink called the penicillin.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yummy antibiotic taste. Yeah, I don't know. Chardonnay can be really smooth sometimes. I mean, trust me, I love a Chardonnay, but yeah, not when I'm kind of cold and in long johns.
Definitely not.
It's just not,
No.
it's no, thank you. Well, so you asked me how my week was, and besides feeling like I'm, I don't know, doing okay on the health front. I have been fascinated / annoyed with some of my friends who are much better at money management than I am. I mentioned, hey, so when you go to the grocery store, Sarah, maybe cut out things that are expensive that you don't really need in order to like be healthy. So
This is what they told you.
No. This is what I'm doing.
Okay.
When I go to the grocery store, because I got to save money. I'm a very poor person. I don't have money. So I've got this group of friends who are very into crypto right now. It's sort of Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of that stuff. I'm going to stay real surface because if you don't know what cryptocurrency is, this will not be of any interest to you. I know a lot about it because I have to talk about it for work occasionally, and I'm also interested because I'm interested in things that are trendy, and financial stuff is very beyond me when I apply it to my life, but I kind of like to know what's going on in the world. And this group of friends are almost like day trader level of enthusiasm about this. And so most of it is completely over my head. However, sometimes, and this is like Slack channels, right? So there's all this activity. I don't even read all of it half the time because I'm like, there's like 400 messages in the last hour that I haven't read. Like, that's just going into the ether. I don't need to like scroll up and like figure out where somebody moved their crypto wallet to, kind of thing. So it's like I'm getting like maybe 25% of the information, but I like it because I feel like at least I'm a fly on the wall of people who are like, oh, I bought this currency with this other currency, and I traded it, and now it's up like 30%, and I took my profits, and yeah, that's capital gains, but like still I sort of made money from doing nothing. I mean, this is not unlike somebody who's active in the stock market. Same idea. It's just all, it's a brave new world. Then you got NFTs for art. That's a whole thing. So I find it fascinating. And yet, because I'm not actively participating, because it's like, I don't have $10 like just sitting around where I'm like, just burn it. Doesn't matter. It's kind of like gambling to me. When I go to Vegas, I'm like, the money I have is the money I for sure have. If I gamble it, sure, I might make more, but I might lose all of it. I'd rather just have it. That's my safety
I'm the
zone.
same, yeah.
Yeah. And so the whole, like, the high of being part of something and making bets and hoping you're right and kind of being okay if you're not right, because maybe you'll be right next time, is just terrifying to me.
It's too risky.
It's terrifying to me, and I'm just not flush with cash where I'm like, you know what? Let's have some fun here. With a few $100s that I wasn't going to use. I'm like, I use every dollar, and sometimes I'm like not in the black. So I try not to be like sort of jealous, when someone's like, yeah, I mean, I could like literally buy a car with my winnings from what I made, but I'm going to go ahead and invest it in this other new thing because I heard Elon Musk might invest, that kind of stuff.
Totally. Yeah.
And I'm like, God, it's like the rich get richer. You got to have money to make money. So I'm like, and again, these are my friends. So I don't, I'm not like that annoyed, but I'm just like, it would just be so nice to be in a position where you're like, yeah, I'm fine. All my bills are paid. And then I have this fun money left over to be able to be part of the crypto boom and maybe make like 30 grand in a week.
Do you think that you would, if you did have, you were flush with, extra cash, do you think you would play it?
I don't know. I mean, well, it's not really, you're not really playing. I mean,
I know,
it's real money, but I mean, I'm so far behind being at that point. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even contribute to an IRA.
Sure.
I have no benefits. I have to pay my own health insurance, car payment. I mean, the whole thing is like, it's just not happening.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. I don't know what it would be like to be like, yeah, I got money. I got lots of money.
But don't forget, mo money, mo problems.
Yeah. I know.
I
don't really subscribe to that. I believe that money will not solve all problems, but it solves a lot of problems, turns out.
Yeah.
All the things that I think about in any given week, it's been a week since we sat down. I'm like, how many times did I think about money this week? Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
Multiple times per day where I'm like, oh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? It's a game of Tetris. It always is. But yeah, I'm also very lucky. I've got, money. I've got a roof over my head. I have my health. Don't have a lot of money, but I know it could be much worse. So I hope I don't sound like I'm complaining too much. It's just one of these things where I'm like, okay, I cannot participate in this exciting thing that a lot of
Yeah.
other people are participating in, and I just have to be okay with that. And so I will be.
Well, I like that. I mean, it's a really good attitude, Sarah.
Thank you,
And
Heather.
I would be the same. I'm not a gambling woman at all, and I'm, trying to harness the risky, huge, chaotic business that my dad was so good at managing. But I don't want that. Like, I want to harness it and simplify it because I feel like I am a risk taker in some ways, but not as much as my dad. My dad really understood how to, move money around and work with banks and all that. It's just not really my jam. Never been a gambling woman. Occasionally I'll throw a quarter into a slot machine if I'm in Vegas just for funsies, but I'm definitely not throwing money around just for fun. But yeah, I mean, gosh, it's been a bit of a whirlwind week. I mean, I feel like this week in particular, I'll wake up in the morning and I've been having very crazy dreams as usual. And it's like, I'm like, what day is it? Every single day. I'm like, is it Saturday? Oh, no, it's Thursday. It's
Well,
like
you're in
Tuesday.
good company. I think we're all a little bit like that these days.
I like feel a little like spun out sometimes. I'm just like, I'm trying to manage a lot and I feel like it's been a bit stressful this week. There's been a lot of very specific things that my sister and I have had to investigate that have been, I told my boyfriend, I was trying to explain like my days with her and kind of dealing with unraveling this business stuff. It's like, we've opened up this can of worms that is my dad's business. And within that can of worms is a bunch of other cans of worms. And you keep opening these it's like you open one little thing and it's like, oh, wow, it's way more complicated than I thought. So that's been kind of stressful. Still being very productive though. And I'm just like, as long as I'm being productive every day and I'm getting something done and we're getting further along, I'm cool, But
Yeah.
it's funny. I was just thinking about kind of being an adult and all of these very adult responsibilities that we have. And, we've talked about adulting on the show, and a lot of people hate that word. I don't know. You can call it whatever you want, just being a responsible human that is, I guess, past 30 years old. A lot of my friends and the world, I mean, are doing a lot of very difficult things right now. And, especially because of the pandemic. My friend Avril, she's a lawyer. She's extremely busy. She's got 2 kids. She's, constantly doing stuff for other people. Her days are like packed, taking care of everybody. She just adopted a dog. And the other day she told us this story where this was via text thread. She adopted this dog and she was at the park and opened the window. She was like talking on the phone or something, and the dog jumped out. And it was this super dramatic thing where she was running barefoot. I'm not really sure why she was barefoot, but it was a sunny day in LA and she was chasing after it. And it was just like hearing the stories of like my friends that, my other friend Lisa and Alice, they're dealing with the AB5 thing. They're independent contractors, and that's like a total nightmare, a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, this is a California thing.
Yeah. And then the distance learning thing. I've got friends with kids who, I mean, it's just all of the extreme adulting. My friend Jamie, AKA J-Ro, she was like the other day, wow, everyone is adulting on extraordinary levels. And it's true. And I feel like I'm going through probate, which I don't need to explain what that is because nobody really knows. But I mean, probate, I never knew what that was. That feels very adult.
I still don't know what it is.
I know, dealing with lawyers and banks. It's essentially
Like, Heather's doing probate, whatever that is. Sounds hard.
essentially, in a nutshell, it's what you have to go through if things weren't totally buttoned up with like a will or a trust, or at banks where you someone who passed away has not named a beneficiary. You have to go through the courts to officially be the beneficiary of like property.
Sounds
and
like
that kind of thing.
something that is not at the top of anyone's list.
No, nobody knows what it means.
But I mean,
Anyway.
like you also don't want to do it. But you have
No,
to.
it's like lawyers and courts, and of course not. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that painful. It's just like I never knew what that was about, and
Right.
it's actually interesting. A lot of these things that I'm like at the same time pretty fascinated, like you were saying about like the crypto stuff. It's like I am fascinated by it. Like, wow, I had no idea this existed. That's what this is. Like, God, it's so crazy. All these laws and all these hoops you have to jump through when life changes, you know? But, you know, nobody really has an outlet right now. And I think, you know, that's why we talk about our trials and tribulations of being an adult. We don't really have an outlet. It's really hard, you know? And last night when I was out with my new lady friends, I felt this like outlet. I was just like, oh my God, I don't even have to talk about probate. Like we can laugh and have fun and
Yeah.
and just be a gaggle of girls, you know? It was just
Yeah, I think it's a very trite phrase, and I see it around all the time. And normally I'd be like, maybe slightly eye rolly, but when people say like, it's okay to not be okay. And you see that a lot, right? It's like every once in a while, it's like someone will tweet that, or you see it in some sort of, you know, similar form. And normally I'd be like, yeah, I know, life is hard. But I kind of embrace that sometimes because it's like for all the things that you just listed, I mean, life is hard, but there's this added stress that we've all taken on, and we've kind of gone through like panic and then like reluctant acceptance because it's not going to be forever. And then it's like, gosh, but it's not like ending anytime soon. I'm really talking about pandemic stuff and how people have had to take on a lot of stuff at home and you can't go anywhere. And yeah, like your outlets with a gaggle of girls, like that becomes this like extremely special event rather than something that you get used to doing as kind of a way to blow off steam. And yeah, I mean, I feel, yeah, like the sort of keep it together stuff is hard enough. And sometimes I'm like, I'm glad that I'm not distracted by needing to like go make an appearance at someone's birthday drinks thing or whatever, because there's so much other stuff to do. But I've gotten so used to it that there are times where it kind of gets brought up. Like I have a friend who lives in LA who mentioned they might want to do a road trip and come see me at some point. And I'm like, great. But then I'm like, well, let me think about this though. Like when?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't have like a guest room for you. And like, what if I'm working? And like, where are we going to go? We just going to sit there? You know, like what if the Airbnb is full? Then we really just kind of have to sit in my house, you know, or just come and go and kind of be out of the way. It's like, it turns into this thing where I'm like, or it would just be easier for you to not come. Yeah, let's do that. Let's have you not come.
let's take a rain check.
Yeah. But it's like, I want to, but I'm like, now it feels really unnatural to me.
I agree. It's funny how that is happening. I there's so much to talk about in this realm because, you know, we're kind of experiencing this new normal, and there's certain things that I feel comfortable with that like even venturing out. It's like I just want to be home and I want to be cozy in my PJs. You know, it's like you really do adapt. You know, we are so good at that, and it's
so true.
Some of this stuff is like. It was hard to kind of break the ice, you know, even just like, I was like kind of hemming and hawing. Do I get a glass of wine last night? I'm like, everyone else was getting cocktails. I'm like, let's just do it, you know, but it's just like, this is something that I used to do all the time, weekly, many times a week, you know, socialize. But, you know, it's definitely more of a special occasion now. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I am with you on that. I look forward to the eventual cocktail. I'll have it at some point. But yeah, it's I'm really into this ridiculous reality show called Married at First Sight. Don't know if I've mentioned it before. Yeah, I mean, queen of trash television, and this is no exception. There was this series. I think it was like last year called Love Is Blind, where like people were encased in these rooms and they couldn't see each other, but they could talk. And then they decide, like, they talk to like a variety, like there's men and there's women and they're all kind of mingling, but it's always just one-on-one at a time. And then they like decide who they want to marry, and then they marry that person. Or they decide like, oh, now that I know you in real life, I've decided not to marry you, kind of thing. It's just ridiculous. This is even worse. It's experts, I'm doing air quotes, experts who work for, I don't even know where they work, decide based on like a bunch of applications that they get. And as far as I know, it's not same-sex marriages yet. Not any of the series or seasons that I've seen, but they match up people, and the people see each other and meet each other for the first time at their wedding. So
Wow.
it's like the guy standing at the altar, woman walks down the aisle, they go like, "Hi, nice to meet you." Then they get married,
No
and then
way.
yeah, yeah, it's
Whoa.
like an arranged marriage, but like plus, and then you decide whether or not you want to stay married or get a divorce. And most people don't stay married, but sometimes they do. I'm now 3
Interesting.
seasons in. Who even knows? Like, who's
I'm kind of
watching these shows?
intrigued.
Like, there's this whole production. There's like 12 seasons, so I'm going backwards. But this is one of my things where I'm like, normally I'd be like, am I like really gonna watch 2 hours of Married at First Sight? Like, no, I'm gonna like go do something else. But now I'm like, well, it's dark. No one's out anyway. Sure, I'll do that, and then I'll feel myself falling asleep, and then I'll go to bed. Woo! Hot Thursday night, Heather.
Very sexy.
Hot Thursday night.
I love it.
Thank you.
But you know what? Honestly, some of my best nights are being in my matching PJs under my weighted blanket and watching an old movie.
There you go. Well, speaking of things to watch or listen to, obviously this is our little podcast. If you're listening, thank you. By the way, probably not the only podcast that you listen to, but maybe it is. And I listen to lots of podcasts. It's my new music. Not that I don't like music anymore, but there are just so many podcasts that I've added to my library, and so there's always hours and hours of content that I don't get to every week, and these are regular podcasts, sometimes daily podcasts. And so when I'm ready to like do a walk or a jog or something, and I'm like, I got an hour, so maybe I'm like a little bit more leisurely, or maybe I really only have a half hour. So I'm like, okay, let's pick up the pace. I always choose a podcast that's roughly about however much time I have, so that from beginning to end, I'm kind of taken on a journey. And it's great. So I listen to a lot of stuff because I like to be, outside walking my dog and putting in my steps. And it's funny how every podcast that I listen to, I tend to go for, some of the more obvious ones like Radiolab and This American Life and the New York Times The Daily and 99% Invisible. And those are highly produced podcasts. They're not always about the same thing. They're very much, there's a style, but it's self-contained types of information. And then you have other podcasts, and I think ours would go into this category where it's like, sure, they're self-contained, but it's very much about the people behind the podcast. You and I
Personalities, yeah.
are not spending this hour doing a deep dive on, I was going to say bombing Syria. We probably wouldn't do that. But, anything where it's like, oh, like super like investigative reporting that we spent
Sure.
the last 6 months doing, that's not really the nature of this, but it's definitely the nature of the personalities behind the podcast. And I like other podcasts like that as well.
Sure.
In fact, my favorite podcasts are often just because I like the hosts. I like their back and forth. Sometimes other people will kind of come in. There's voices and names that you start to get familiar with. You start to build this understanding, whether it's accurate or not, of where they might live.
Yeah.
And just kind of how their lives are. I have this thing, my mom and I are really different this way, where I got her into podcasting and she's like total podcast nut, just like me, although we don't always listen to the same stuff. And she's like, oh, every time I hear a new voice, I have to look them up on the internet because I want to know what they look like. And I'm like, oh, I'm the
Don't do
exact
that.
opposite.
I
I'm the
know, me
exact
too.
opposite because I once saw Roman Mars. He's the host of 99% Invisible. He has a beautiful, velvety man voice. He's just so great to listen to. I looked him up once, or maybe I saw him by accident. I don't remember. And I was like, holy shit, that is just not the person I thought you were. And I'm not saying that in a good or bad way. It's just you can never like imagine someone in your head and be accurate. It can't
No, it
be
shatters
done.
your imagination too.
Can't-
And it's
can't-
nice to be stuck in your own
Can't be
imagination.
done. Yeah, totally. And so I'm like, I don't really want to see what people look like. Although it does happen, like, I don't know, it's like in their Twitter profile pic. Or,
I did the same
or
thing
whatever.
with like Peter Sagal and like Kai Ryssdal. And
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's funny. I really wish I didn't, not for any particular reason, but I was so attached to their voices And I loved creating and fabricating my own image of what they would be like.
Totally. So I mentioned podcasts because there are a couple podcasts that I'm thinking of in particular where it's like the behind the scenes is so kind of like saucy and juicy and, you know, sort of dramatic. One is not necessarily in a bad way, but there's a network called The Ringer, a lot of sports stuff, but a lot of like pop culture, television shows. The Ringer has a variety of podcasts. It's actually owned by Spotify now.
I like The Ringer.
Yeah, and I listened to this series called Binge Mode. It started with Game of Thrones, where it was just like this whole like extremely deep dive on every single episode of every single episode in the whole series up until the end. And it was hosted by this duo, Jason and Mallory, who worked for The Ringer. Jason actually has left and he works somewhere else now. But the two of them were obviously good friends, worked together, super smart, and just like nerding out like times a million. And it was just so enjoyable because
I like
you're
that
like,
show.
I didn't even really relate. But I was like, I just love how much you guys care about this. That I mean, it was just like a dessert treat. You know, every time I'm like, new binge mode, yay! And they're kind of long episodes, so I'm like, I'm gonna go on a long walk.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that they just finished the deep dive on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, which is, you know, like all of the Avengers and Captain America and Iron Man, and there's like so many of them, you know, the Hulk, right? People say, oh, you can skip that one, whatever, like all of that MCU stuff where I'm like, I am so not in that, but I am watching WandaVision on Disney Plus, so I'm like, I guess I care more than I used to. Maybe I'll go, you know, I'll do their Marvel deep dive and it'll help me want to watch the movies that I kind of don't really want to watch otherwise, just because their enthusiasm will keep me going. But they actually just wrapped up their last Marvel episode and they're not doing binge mode anymore because, again, Jason, one of the co-hosts, has moved on and he's working for another outlet at the time. And it's like those two are, I mean, they are brought to tears on a regular basis because they love this stuff so much. And when something ends, it's like literally like there's some crying going on. Yeah, and hugging, I love you so much and stuff. And it's like, it is so authentic. Like I have been walking. I remember because I've been listening to them forever. So I remember like some of my old LA walks and I'd be like tearing up by myself. Aww. You know, with my headphones in and just thinking like someone will pass me and be like, that poor woman is crying. I'm like, no, it's just binge mode. You know, like, I'm cool. Don't worry. I'm just really
they're tears of joy.
Tears of joy. I'm gutted. Yeah. So there's that. But there's another podcast, and this actually is like a really shitty story, but it's something that I know about, so I'll share it with all of you. There's another network called Gimlet Media. Gimlet Media, also owned by Spotify. Coincidentally enough, Spotify is, you know, they're in the business of buying podcast entities that are popular. So Gimlet Media was very popular as before it was even a company called Gimlet Media, because there was a podcast called Startup. Some years ago, Alex Bloomberg, who was an NPR guy, decided, I want to start a podcast network. And so the first podcast series was about starting that network. And the podcast itself was called Startup.
That's cool.
And since then, and it was super popular and it was really well done. You know, good storytellers. And, you know, he found a partner and he hired a bunch of people and they were in an office in Brooklyn, and then they expanded, and then they, you know, decided to launch new podcasts, and it's a very different company than it was way back when. And I've been listening since the beginning, so I'm like, I love that, you know, behind the scenes BTS sort of.
I love that.
We're telling stories, but our story is also our story, and that is woven through often. One of the podcasts, which is, I believe, ended up being their most popular, meaning the most listened to, was a podcast called Reply All. And I'm saying it in the past tense because Reply All recently went through a lot of drama and is currently on hold. And The reason is there's some information that's a little bit murky, but I will try to simplify it as best I can. So the show itself was a weekly show, primarily hosted by these two guys, Alex Goldman and PJ Vogt. And they have a really good rapport, and they're funny, and they're like super dialed into the internet, and they do some of these. Sometimes it's kind of just like a quirky, fun hour show about whatever. And sometimes it's like, whoa, you like flew to India to meet a scammer that you talked to on the phone and like actually did that and like found out stuff, or you know, like it's like this is a real show. And some of the episodes you're like, wow, this must have taken you guys a lot of time and resources and the whole thing. And there's a team beyond the show. It's not just the two guys. But recently and sometimes they do like a little mini series within the series. Like, okay, for the next 3 episodes, it's going to be about this thing. Like the Indian scammer story was like not just one self-contained episode. It spanned over a few. And one of these little mini-series within the show was about the magazine Bon Appetit and how there was a work culture going on behind the scenes that was unfair to people of color and minorities. And there was stuff where it is not that it's ever been appropriate, but very much not appropriate. And a lot of that stuff is out in the open these days. And a lot of companies have had, reckonings of sorts, and people in positions of power and management have had to, either change your tune or lose your job, or, that is, I will not say cancel culture, because I think that's the stupidest effing term in the entire world, but you know what I'm getting at, that sort of thing that's going on. And largely really good reasons, right? It's like people are like, this shit's got to change, and it is slowly but surely. I have to believe that. But this miniseries about Bon Appetit was this, like, again, deep, investigative, lots of people on record and interviews, lots of background about how the magazine under Condé Nast was set up, and Anna Wintour's kind of in it, and it was like, oh, this is really fascinating. Well, turns out that Gimlet Media, which is the company that produces Reply All, and Reply All is the show that was producing this Bon Appetit series, was going through some workers wanted to unionize. And this is like a couple of years ago. And, when workers want to unionize within a company, there are often people who want to unionize and then other people who don't support unionization. And I'm not going to get into whether that's good or bad because it's different for every company, but it sounds as though the folks who wanted to unionize at Gimlet Media were people who in many ways felt like underrepresented, not heard, and didn't have opportunities for advancement that they felt were unfairly, kind of targeting the lower level positions. And a lot of this was, just sensitive stuff. And it sounds like some of the folks at Reply All, and this is according to people who worked there, so I'm only going to pontificate so much, were not only against the unionizing of these particular workers, but kind of actively did not support this, which was seen by many people who were trying to be proactive as, you're trying to keep us down kind of thing. Well, that all sort of was happening behind the scenes. And when the Bon Appetit story started to air, that story was kind of similar in the way that the story itself was, here are these people who are like extremely accomplished culinary chefs who are working behind the scenes for this magazine, and it's very sweatshoppy, and they're getting overlooked for people because it's like a boys club or something that maybe has some racial bias. And the whole story, and it was good. I listened to a couple episodes and I'm like, this is like really fascinating. I had no idea. And which is that I love that about podcasts. And some of the folks at Gimlet were like, this is like really inappropriate, because this is what we were going through at the company that's producing this series, as if they're a little bit more holier than thou than what was going on at Bon Appetit. And like, this is like really upsetting. Well, the Bon Appetit series has not even aired in its entirety. They're just like shelving the rest of it.
Wow.
One of the hosts has left Reply All. The like main senior producer, who was great, she has also stepped away from the show. I don't believe either of them have left the company, but it's like, whoa, what, like, and this all happened like very recently within the last couple of weeks. And there's kind of this underlying, because now I'm sort of following certain people who are employees at the company on Twitter. Like, where am I going to get more information about what happened?
Yeah.
There's obviously some details that are pretty
scandal.
damning. Yeah. You know, because you don't just sort of go like, oh, someone's mad at me, I guess I'll just leave my like hit show. You know, it's there's things going on, and I don't want to point blame because of course I don't work there, but I'm like, this is a very strange, like ultra meta, like Inception thing going on where it's like, yeah, there are many layers to it, and it kind of, at least where we stand at the time of this recording, is like, okay, so now the show I liked is basically no more, and maybe it will come back, maybe it'll be better, maybe it never will, don't know, but that was a whole thing that happened, and that's like so many layers under me being like, new episode, cool, let me go on a walk. So I don't know. I guess my point of this is like, you just never know what's going on with people.
God, it's so funny that that's sort of the moral of the story, because I was just talking about that last night. You really don't. And the thing is, especially now with the mainstream media, you don't really know if you're being fed lies or fact, and you have to do your own research. And yeah, it's hard to really know. Like I've been thinking a lot about this because I've been watching the Woody Allen and Mia Farrow documentary. I've just watched the first episode on HBO, and there's only one episode out, but that is a really crazy story too. And there's always two sides, and you know, you're getting, you know, you've gotten this side from Mia Farrow, but then you hear these other stories about how kind of militant she was, and it's just like, you don't really know. And the documentarians are painting a certain picture, but who really knows what happened? And we'll never know. I mean, I feel like history and facts have just gotten more and more twisted. It's hard to really know what to believe. But that's interesting. I did listen to that podcast a bit back in the day, but it's funny also when I have memories too I was thinking about what our memories are now because of the pandemic. You know, a lot of people have like Zoom memories, and like, what are your memories from last year? Like hanging out in your PJs. Like, you know, I feel like now when I look back on the last year, I have a lot of memories of walks listening to a podcast, like that particular interview with Mark Maron, and it's funny how that becomes a memory. You know, it's like your brain has to calculate something.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
It's all very fascinating.
Yeah. No, I truly remember crying on a walk in LA, and like the street I was
Like
crossing
where you
at the
were.
time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and just being like, I look kind of weird right now, but well, whatever, I can't stop.
No, I actually remember. I recall that. I remember you. I think you even had a cold open at one point that was like, I was crying on my walk, and people thought I looked weird or whatever. But you know, the pandemic, speaking of, has really created all kinds of existential crises, and has really kind of turned like the fashion industry on its head. And I'm not going to get into that. I mean, I've been reading a lot of fascinating articles about how, you know, fashion designers have really had to go full 180. They can't do what they did before. And a lot of people are, you know, hustling to sell all the stuff that they don't wear, which I've been saying that for years that I'm going to do that, but it's kind of a pain. And I really haven't gotten to it yet. And I bet people won't even buy this stuff anymore, because who needs, a sequence top for their Zoom meetings? Anyway, it's, you know, affected identities, whatnot, but it also has opened, you know, our minds to like new things, like at least for me. You know, we all kind of have had to change our style, and we're like forced to, which sometimes can be kind of a blessing. And I never owned a turtleneck. Maybe a cowl neck.
That is surprising to me.
Let me take a step back. In the 90s, I probably had one from the Gap because they were very popular then. I didn't pair them with like mom jeans or anything because that was sort of the style in the 90s, but they were really popular back then, and they were kind of a staple. So yes, I think I had like a Kelly green one or something. I've definitely had turtlenecks before, but I haven't in the past like 10 years ever really thought about them or wanted one, because I would see like a guy wearing a turtleneck like at work or something, and I always felt like they were sort of creepy on men.
Oh, poor men wearing turtlenecks. I think it's such a good look.
Well, now I do. I've changed. I've definitely reverse engineered this one. So I have completely changed my mind on turtlenecks. Actually, I'm kind of fascinated by them. They make me feel kind of chic and powerful. They're an interesting garment. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the history, because I kind of went down this rabbit hole, like, when did the turtleneck come to be? And so apparently, allegedly, they kind of popped up around 1927. They were like popularized by this one designer who basically wove like a collar into a sweater. And so then it kind of, evolved from there. But it's been around for like, hundreds of years, and were, symbols of kind of like strength and style and modesty. It was very working man kind of protective wear. It was very practical. It started out very practical. Even in the medieval times, people would wear that chainmail and it would chafe your neck. So they would wear these like kind of turtleneck things under that so that it wouldn't, scratch their neck. Some of them turned into these kind of ruffles up the neck, which was kind of like a status thing. And it was all often like hiding health conditions. But I find it really interesting that I have completely changed my mind about them. I wear them all the time. I find them to be very chic and stylish. The 70s, like the Black Panthers wore them. Independent women wore them. They were kind of anti-establishment. In the 40s and 50s, Jane Mansfield made them more feminine and sexy and bohemian, and Audrey Hepburn and all these kind of cool like action stars like James Bond and Charles Bronson. In the 80s, they became uncool. And this is where I think because I grew up in the 80s, in the 80s in particular, that decade, they were apparently like out, they were out of style. And I think because that was such a prominent decade for me, because I was growing up, that's when I didn't like turtlenecks. I just want to do a little shout out to the old turtleneck. And I'm so glad that the pandemic has turned my mind around on these, because I appreciate them very much.
Interesting. I will say, first of all, I love turtlenecks. Always have. I have lots of turtlenecks. I mean, it's weather appropriate,
Sure.
right? And like the wrong turtleneck, you're like, stifling. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna strangle myself. But even in the 80s, like, oh my God, I'm thinking of like all my class pictures, like turtlenecks for days.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember turtlenecks ever being out. I think some people just like the way they feel or look, and other people don't. But I didn't know they ever had a slump.
I know, isn't that funny?
I bought a sweater. Well, I was going to say the other day. It was my birthday. It was last October. That's the last time I bought a sweater. But it was like this brown sweater with like a exaggerated turtleneck, where it's a big old cow neck kind of thing. And I love that thing. I mean, I'm not going to be able to wear it this summer, but I've been getting lots of use with it over the winter, and it's just like extra material. It's great.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I feel a little guilty that I thought they were creepy back in the day.
Yeah, I know. I've never once been like, ooh, creepy person because they're wearing a turtleneck. But I don't know. I mean, a black turtleneck, I will never not have that in my wardrobe somewhere. It's
And
like,
neither
it's so versatile.
will Steve Jobs. He will always
There you go.
have that.
Yeah, exactly. Look at Steve Jobs. He was onto something.
Yeah.
Speaking of being onto something, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons. And you know what? We're at 103 patrons.
Woo.
That's at patreon.com/havesuchagoodday. If you enjoy the show and you're not yet a patron of ours, it is not mandatory, but boy, would we appreciate it. It's our bread and butter. It's how we keep this community alive. And we were joking about palindromes in last episode. I want to say, if we get, 8 more patrons, we'll be at 111 patrons, which is
That
a
is
palindrome.
fun palindrome.
We're not asking for much, just 8 of you. 8 of you that are listening right now and it's like, oh my gosh, why do they always talk about Patreon? Just maybe consider $1 a month. I mean, you can obviously contribute more if you want, but $1 a month, hopefully that won't break the bank. And we could get to a palindrome number of patrons, and your girl Sarah would be very happy about that.
Oh my God, what if we got to 111 patrons on episode 99?
Oh my God.
That would be like a mind-blowing.
Like I almost peed myself. That'd be so fun. Yeah, I actually really have to pee right now, so it wouldn't be that hard, but I almost did. So anyway,
I love how much
again,
you like palindromes. It's very
love 'em.
endearing.
It's symmetry at its finest. Patreon.com/have such a good day. Thank you in advance. And by the way, new patron. And first of all, we don't always just like list everyone's full names because,
No.
privacy or whatever. But Bill Baggins, I love your name. I don't know if you're a hobbit or not. I don't know if this is coincidental. I don't know if you're kidding. I don't care. But we're very glad to have you. You are our new patron. So I guess you're 103 as far as our number
That is
counts.
a fun name to say, Bill Baggins. I mean, I wonder,
Bill
do you have
Baggins.
big hairy feet? I mean, do tell.
Yeah, do you live under a hill in New Zealand?
Do you live in a grassy knoll with a round door?
Are you looking for a ring? I'm afraid it's not here in the show, but we support you. Hey, we support all our patrons. Thank you so much.
we so do.
Bill,
Shout out to
thanks
you.
thanks for joining the group. And for anybody who's at the $5 per month and up level, join our Discord if you haven't already. It's a lively little conversation. We talk about everything, sometimes show related, sometimes not. So yeah, thanks to everybody who yaks with us and keep it coming.
Yeah, I mean, the Discord has really been on like a level lately. I'm actually, I got to catch up because I think there was a lot of action the last couple days and I've been so crazy busy. So I'll get back to all y'all and the conversations going on in there, but it's really fun. It's a nice kind of ongoing conversation and no pressure. You can take a week and not say anything or a month, and then you kind of come back and there's absolutely no expectation. So come and join our little community.
Indeedy. By the way, if you're not following us on Instagram and Twitter, at HSGD Show is our handle in both places. We try to...
You said that very well.
Thank you. Listen, it's a labor of love here, and we just, all support is so appreciated, even if it's just telling a friend who might enjoy the show as well. That is super helpful to us. So again, thank you to everybody. You're the best. But Heather, I believe on this eve of Le Weekend, we're about done here.
Oh, we are. And I'm going to try to spend as much of my weekend as possible in my matching PJs under my weighted blanket that you gave me.
Well,
I can't wait.
I'm glad. I don't know. I don't know what the weekend holds. Weekends, what are they even anymore? But I'll probably look at my financial planning spreadsheet that I kind of stopped looking at a couple of days ago because I was like, I'm too busy to think about money. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, money.
Oh,
so
spreadsheets.
I'll probably go back to that.
That
So
sounds fun.
pray for me. But
I will pray for you.
Thank you.
In my turtleneck.
I need it. Yeah. We'll be back next week with episode 90 of Have Such a Good Day.
Wow,
How about
Sarah.
that? It is
Wow.
the slow climb to one honey. And
One honey.
until next week, I'll remain Sarah.
And I'll be Heather forever.
Have such a good day.
Bye-bye.